Welcome back to Global Poultry Web Congress, to the section number 2. I would like to remind you that today, on October the 9th, in Poland, at the at the Congress Center Teagasc, we organizing Global Poultry Web Congress, during which we are talking and presenting the latest information from poultry industry. Just a few hours before this time, so just we were talking about current situation in poultry industry, about challenges, forecasts, and perspectives for poultry producers. And now we are moving to the section number 2, during which we are going to talk about animal welfare. And before we will start this section and before we will start the presentations of the topics, I would like to remind everybody that you can put your questions if you are participating online, so you can put your questions in chat, and we will gather all those questions and distribute them to our speakers. Unfortunately, we cannot make separate Q&A sessions because of lack of time, but we assure you that all those questions will be answered by our speakers. After the Congress, we are going to record all those answers and distribute via our social media channels, our website of the Congress, and via our educational online platform, which is called agrimasterclass.com. So, what we are going to talk about today, we are going to talk about animal welfare and poultry farming in the EU, and those changes and challenges which are going to happen in the nearest time, probably from 2022. And this topic will be disclosing Director of European Forum of Farm Animal Breeders, Ms. Anna Granados Chapatte. And so just here we are, and let's start the section number 2. Anna, you're welcome.
Hello, I'm Anna Granados. I'm the director of EFFAB, the Secretary General of RAIZMAN.
Welcome back to
Hello, I'm Anna Granados. I'm the director of EFFAB, the Secretary General of RAIZMAN. I would like to thank the organization committee for the invitation today. I'm very pleased to be here to talk about animal welfare at the European level and the ongoing initiatives related mainly, of course, to the poultry sector, and in particular to the poultry breeding sector. So, as I said, I work in EFFAB, the European Forum of Farm Animal Breeders. So I will start by introducing you a bit what is EFFAB and the role of EFFAB, as well as RAIZMAN. So EFFAB is the voice of more than 40 breeding and reproduction associations, cooperatives, and companies working in the field of animal breeding and reproduction in Europe. They are active in poultry, ruminants, aquaculture, pigs, and insect genetics. Our members are here represented in this slide with their logos. In the poultry sector, our members are making breeding for poultry meat production of different species and production of eggs. They are involved in all the production systems, so from conventional to free range and organic. So EFFAB mission is to represent our members' interest in Brussels mainly and to engage dialogue around the role of animal breeding in sustainable food production. So we are involved in policy and legislation, and we promote responsible and balanced breeding through Code EFFAB. Code EFFAB is a code of good practice for animal breeding, and I will explain a bit better later what is in. We also engage in research and innovation, supporting the importance of research and innovation in the field of animal genetics and research activities. So in terms of research and innovation, we are involved in 8 European projects. You can see here the logo of 7 of them, sorry. The last one is starting very soon, and it is called Ruminant. So most of these projects are related to breeding and genetics, but not all of them, and other are related to other aspects of livestock production, like, for example, the reduction of use of antimicrobials in the livestock sector. So EFFAB has a role of knowledge provider in these projects, disseminating results of the research and engaging with policymakers and other stakeholders. There is also FABER-TP, European technology platform, active in the field of animal genetics and reproduction, and representing research institutes working in the same field. So EFFAB members are also members of FABER-TP, and FABER-TP aims to show the importance of research in the sector and to strengthen collaboration between the private and the public sector. So EFFAB and FABER-TP collaborates also with other technology platforms and associations in Brussels, as you can see here in this slide. And being involved in research and innovation makes possible to promote science-based regulations and an objective analysis of situations and decisions that are taken in the field by our members. You can see some of the organizations we are working with and some of the activities that we make all along the year to engage dialogue on animal breeding practice and research. So now I'm going to explain you a bit more about animal breeding in the context of animal welfare and what is called EFFAB. So a breeding program, as you probably know, is a balanced and responsible combination of several traits. These traits are related to animal health, animal welfare, the reduce of emissions and carbon footprint of animal production, the better use of resources, the production, the quality and the quantity of the production, whilst keeping genetic diversity. Of course, the examples that are here in this slide are related to the poultry sector more than the other species that are covered by EFFAB. These balanced and responsible combinations of traits are also the commitments of poultry animal breeders for responsible and balanced breeding. And they are reflected in Code EFFAB, so the Code of Good Practice for Sustainable Animal Breeding that I was mentioning before. So after this introduction about EFFAB and the importance of breeding, also for animal welfare, I will go through the animal welfare initiatives at European level, starting by the policy context. So, as you probably know, the European Commission launched in December 2019 the European Green Deal, aiming to make Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. The European Green Deal foresees a number of actions and initiatives in different sectors, and the farm to fork and the biodiversity strategies have been designed and presented during 2020 to accelerate transition of European food systems. So related to the farm to fork strategy, so published in May 2020, there is a number of objectives that aims to improve the sustainability of the food production and to decrease the impact of the European food systems. To increase sustainability, and when we talk about sustainability, the Commission talks about the 3 main pillars of it, which are people, planet, and prosperity. they have defined some targets for 2030. And you can see here in the slide the main ones, which are related to the decrease of the sales of antimicrobials for farm animals by 50%, the increase of land to organic farming, and also for organic aquaculture, and the reduce of nutrient losses and use of chemical pesticides. So animal welfare is also part of the farm to fork strategy as a tool to improve animal health and food quality, reduce the use of antimicrobials, the medication, and to help to preserve biodiversity. In practice, it means that the Commission has started a number of initiatives. The first is the fitness check, so the evaluation of the current legislation. They evaluate if it's fit for purpose, and likely the revision. The revision of the current legislation, including animal welfare during transport legislation. There are also foreseen new legislation for species that are not well covered or not yet covered by a specific legislation. We will talk about later also. I mean, some of the examples are rabbits, pullets, broiler breeders, quail, ducks, dairy cows, fish. And the Commission is also exploring options for animal welfare labeling. So the fitness check covers a number of initiatives, consultations mainly, that can be scientific consultations to EFSA mainly, but also to member states. And it is also about public consultations. So the Commission launched a roadmap last year, and they collect feedback from business operators, trade unions, NGOs, and citizens. And the main outputs of the fitness check, of course, there is other ones, but the main ones related by the Commission are related to the ban of the export of live animals to third countries, the ban on the use of all cages, all type of cages, on slaughter without stunning, as already we were saying, a specific legislation for some species, and the European Animal Welfare Labeling Scheme. You can see here in this slide the regulations and directives that are explored under the fitness check. Here you can see other ongoing initiatives on animal welfare at European level. As you know, the European sector, the European livestock sector is under pressure of NGOs mainly. These NGOs are pressuring civil society, but also members of the European Parliament. Their main campaigns at this moment are to ban the export of animals, of live animals, to third countries, to limit the length of the journeys, and to ban the cages. So this End of Cages Citizens Initiative, what is about? A citizens initiative is something that is foreseen in European legislation to give the possibility to citizens to express directly to the Commission concerns they have about a situation in Europe. So this End of Cage Citizens Initiative has collected 1.4 million signatures across Europe. NGOs were making campaign to collect these signatures, and they were submitted to the European Commission in 2020. This call is asking the Commission to ban cages for all the species you can see here in this slide. So With this slide, I would like just to show you and to mention how EFSA is working on this fitness check, how EFSA is supporting the work of the European Commission, providing scientific opinions on the issues and the species that are mentioned here in the slide. This kind of details will be defined later by the Commission or by in a proposal that will be drafted by the Commission. The European Parliament is also focusing on the animal welfare during transport. So they are inquiring if Member States and the European Commission are implementing and enforcing properly current legislation. On this matter, they have been performing hearings at the European Parliament in which EFFAB has been participating late in September 2021. And the ENIT committee, of course, there is different members with different views. So they have drafted a report and recommendations. And now the amendments to this report and recommendations have been introduced. There are more than 1,200 amendments that are under discussion until December 2021. There in December, a vote of all these amendments will be done. So what is this ENIT committee is going to advise the Commission? We don't already know, even we have some ideas, even if we can think that the transport of animals to third countries could be very limited or even ban. I mean, at this moment, we don't know what's going to happen. The other institution, the European level, which can take action or make proposals to the Commission is the European Council. The European Council has recently asked the Commission to ban, for some of the countries, have asked for a European-wide ban of long-distance transport to third countries by road and sea. And other countries also had asked to stop the killing of one-day-old chicks. This is a limited number of countries asking for this to take action to the Commission. So they ask the Commission should answer afterwards, making a proposal or not taking into account the comments of the Council. And that is will be explained in the next slide on the way of all these European initiatives, ongoing initiatives can converge together at the European Commission. So again, we have this European Citizens Initiative, the end of cages. We have a quarter of the member state that can make a proposal, and the European Parliament that can make also demands and proposals to the Commission. The Commission has to take all this into account. Of course, has to take into account also EFSA scientific opinion that we were mentioning before, has to take into account also views from stakeholders like EFFAB, like the farming sector, and to make proposal that is going to be discussed afterwards at the Parliament. So what we can conclude at this moment after the presentation today is that there is a lot of things ongoing. There is a lot of directions that could be taken at the European level to improve animal welfare or to limit actions at the farm level in terms of animal welfare during transport. Again, there is a lot of intentions, a lot of different views in the European Parliament, also in the Commission, also from NGOs, but no decision at this moment has been taken. Again, EFSA has to focus also on these aspects and provide scientific inputs to the Commission. That has to be taken into account. what we can clearly say is that first, primary breeders are committed to improve animal welfare as well as animal health and other aspects of sustainability. They have been working on their own initiatives since years. I have been presenting you code EFFAB for responsible and balanced breeding, in which animal welfare or improved animal welfare is part of breeding programs. What is clear too is there is a lot of initiatives ongoing at the European level to improve animal welfare at the farm level, but not specific rules or not definitive decisions has been taken, although that there is the aim to ban cages at the European level. But it has to be clear also is that the first thing to do is to define what is a cage. The definition of a cage has to be done before following this reflection. It is also essential for farming and society that new and revisited legislation takes into account scientific evidence. Feelings are good, are nice, can be understood, but this is not the way to take decisions and put on the table requirements to be fulfilled by farmers and breeders. And animal welfare is part of a whole, so decisions has to take into account the other aspects of animal farming. So sustainability and animal welfare are not separate things. Both has to be reflected together. Both have to be part of the same approach, and the farm to fork strategy is perhaps the good approach to do it, but we have also to take into account farmers and breeders' perspective. Animal welfare is important for us, is important for farmers, is important for animals, and on this purpose we really think that we can make progress, but all together and making compromise and listening one each other. That is the main role of EFFAB, and our work is to engage in dialogue and try to delete or to erase polarization of positions. So thank you very much again for the invitation, for listening the presentation today. If you have any question, if you want to contact us later, yeah, these are our data contacts, and don't hesitate it. Thank you very much again for this opportunity, and bye-bye.
Anna, thank you very much for presenting those information connected to animal welfare on poultry industry in the EU. And now I would like to move to the next our speaker. It is Mr. Eran RAIZMAN, who is from FAO and who is Senior Animal Health and Production Officer, who is going to talk about avian influenza observations and future perspectives. Very hot topic for poultry industry in the nearest and in the last few years, and I hope that the information from FAO will put the light on onto the current situation with this kind of disease. Eran, you're welcome to start.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Eran RAIZMAN. I'm the Regional Officer for Animal Health and Production for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations for the region of Europe and Central Asia, situated in Budapest, Hungary. I'm very pleased to be here. And I decided to focus my presentation today on avian influenza, some technical information, and also how FAO is helping countries to cope with the disease outbreaks around the world. So I will share my screen now. Okay. Before I start, I need to acknowledge the help of some colleagues, particularly Xavier, Akiko, and Mirko, and Sophie, for helping me to have this presentation ready. Before we start to talk about avian influenza, I think it should be important to mention what the Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, what is their global mandate. The first one is, of course, to improve nutrition. This is why it's the Food and Agriculture Organization. It's the same time increasing agricultural productivity around the world, particularly among the poorest countries, people. Raise the standards of living in rural populations that are dedicating to agriculture, and to contribute to by that to the global economic growth of countries. FAO has offices basically around the world in most developing countries, but it has some very important offices, regional offices for each continent, basically. In South America, it's in Chile, in Africa, in Ghana, for Asia, it's in Bangkok, and our office that covers Europe and Central Asia is in Budapest. Just a short overview. We'll go first on what is avian influenza globally, and then how FAO assists countries to cope with different avian influenza emergencies, and we'll continue with different future prospects on avian influenza control and the importance of monitoring and early warning in this case. Let's start with a short overview on avian influenza around the world. Here we can see that since 2009, I will show you how really the disease outbreaks of different kinds of avian influenza have been spreading for different reasons that we don't fully understand. Some of them are climatic, other it's difficult to predict, but there are a lot of outbreaks that have been spreading in many countries. So here in Europe, you can see the one color is the H5N8 is very unique. This avian influenza, and then in Asia, H5N1 continue a problem, and different kinds of strains are continuing appearing in different parts of the world, but such as H5N6 and H5N1. These different strains have different impact on the poultry sector, and also as a zoonotic disease that can impact the human health. Just to show that this is in 2019, and then in 2020 you see the amount of outbreaks of H5N8 in Europe, and now in 2021 how big is it also in Europe, and as well in Africa and East Asia. So the impact is, of course, there's an economic impact, and obviously when we talk about avian influenza, there's a risk of infection to humans, and particularly these days with the pandemic, it's important to understand this impact. In this brief overview, I will, as you can see here, I will refer to several strains, main strains, H5N1, H5N8, H5N6, etc. And I will mention a few important things about each strain, so you will be familiar and understanding that each of these strains has a different impact on the poultry sector and on human health. Let's start with the H5N1 highly pathogenic avian influenza that we all remember from about 10 to 15 years ago, when it was also a pandemic. As you can see on the right corner, upper corner, the mortality can reach up to 53%. It's a very, very aggressive to poultry, but also can impact wild birds. As you see here, we have different, even if this is a strain of avian influenza, we have different what we call clades that are developing almost independently and sometimes mixed with each other in different parts of the world. So we know that in Egypt now, for example, this is endemic. It means that it's all year round, it's there, and it's difficult to get rid of the disease, and every once in a while we have also human cases. Similarly, in Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal, the disease occur quite frequently. And in China and Cambodia and in Southeast Asia, this is also a problem with this disease, with this virus. But again, you can see that in each area, in each geographical area, there are different kinds of strains. So it's important to remember that this virus is going, the diversification is continuing, but increasingly this virus is replaced by highly pathogenic avian influenza H5N8, and I will mention it in a few minutes. Again, it's endemic in several countries, which we really difficult to get rid of. And unfortunately, we fear that the virus is already endemic in Western Africa. Western Africa, particularly Nigeria and Togo, could get of the virus 10 or 15 years ago when it was a pandemic. But since 2012, outbreaks and occurred one after another, and the countries failed to eliminate the virus for different reasons. So we also need to remember that compared to maybe others, to the current pandemic or other zoonotic diseases like Ebola, this disease is not as fatal as might people or other diseases, but still we had close to, in the last few years, we had close to 1,000 cases, and overall 450 something fatalities. When we come to talk about H5N2 or similar, we also see that these are mainly focused in Taiwan and province of China. There is endemic, affecting various poultry species, including ducks. This specific virus also, we can find it in the poultry in Egypt, which was first reported a little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and occasionally we see it in Europe. The H5N5, the highly pathogenic, the first outbreak of this was in Taiwan, and then another outbreak of H5N2 and different H5N5 were also seen lately in domestic and wild birds as well. Now is the interesting part of H5N8. I will later on talk about it when I will mention early warning, but this is relatively a new strain that occurred in the last 5 years. What's important to remember for this one is that it's affecting very much wild birds, in contrast to H5N1 that is very, very, very fatal for domestic poultry, but not as much for wild birds. Here, H5N9 is extremely fatal for wild birds. This is how it's easy to discover it also. But the most exciting or unfortunate and worrisome news is that in February 2021, this year, the first cases of the first human cases occurred in the Russian Federation. This is something we need constantly to follow on, because we know very well how a pandemic can develop easily these days. The way the H5N8 reached the western part of Europe is very interesting, and I will mention it in a few minutes. But it's important also to remember that once the disease is introduced to a country or to a territory with wild birds, it spread into different domestic poultry premises, mainly by the fault of human in terms of biosecurity. So we cannot always blame the wild birds on the spread of this particular of H5N8. We need to remember that even if the introduction is by wild birds, that nobody deny, the spread of the disease into different farms is made by human. Another type of H5N6 that is also a zoonotic one. So far, we have 46 human cases, mainly in China and Laos, and it's still endemic in Vietnam. And what interesting, the problem there is it's co-circulating with H5N1, which is we remember from the big pandemic 15 or 20 years ago. 10 to 15 years ago, let's say. Again, it was found also in wild birds, but the main problem that we are concerned is definitely poultry. Finally, the H7N9 that was very common in about 6 or 7 years ago in China, after it was first detected in 2013 in live bird markets. Many human cases, as you can see here, more than 600 deaths since 2013. However, China, because of the live bird markets, despite the pandemic, China decided to approach at least the case of H7N9 is eliminating these live bird markets it's not easy to find them in many affected provinces of China. This is why it's rather surprising that there are a lot of attack on these wild animal markets in China. But China approached it in a very, very systematic way, and there are very, very few cases discovering lately. As you can see, basically they started vaccinating, and almost no cases occur yearly because of the vaccination. So we can learn a lot from the avian influenza about how to prevent more pandemics around the world. So now I would like to dedicate the time to tell how FAO is assisting countries to prevent, early detect, and rapidly respond to these outbreaks of different kinds of avian influenza. That in the end of the day, it doesn't matter which kind of avian influenza is it. There is a huge impact on the poultry sector, and also there is a risk for human health, as we all know. So FAO is working on different levels. Let's start with the national level, where we really try to increase the capacity of countries to do the risk assessment in terms of understanding where to dedicate resources. So the resources are well used to allow early detection, reporting, timely reporting, and rapid response. We also we work a lot with countries to increase the capacity to conduct surveillance based on this risk assessment, of how we call it risk-based surveillance in different countries. And when already there are outbreaks of the disease, we train veterinary services to conduct outbreak investigation. We increase the capacity of laboratory to detect or to diagnose the disease in timely manner. We work on different policies and legislation, and a lot of communication, risk communication with the veterinary services, how they address the public when there is an outbreak investigation, etc. On the regional level, we try to create a network of diagnostic laboratories that can share information, can share good experience, bad experiences. We try to create a network of surveillance for the same purpose of sharing experiences. We work on biosafety and biosecurity, that to try to harmonize all of the policies as well as the measures in terms of biosecurity. So in all countries in certain region, they adopt more or less the same measures. And also in terms of laboratory diagnostics, we also try to ensure that countries are using the same methodology to diagnose the disease. And at the global level, we do a lot of coordination, expert consultation, publishing a lot of manuals, etc., that will allow any stakeholder or any country, member country, to have good access to information. We realize that in many countries there is no good access to information, not only because there's not good internet, but because of the language barrier, and because there is no much interest. So we try to raise this interest, and we try to facilitate the access to knowledge as much as possible, including translating documents to the local languages. Let me talk a bit about a big project that the FAO has had in the last 10 years for avian influenza surveillance in different parts of the world, as you can see here in West Africa, North in Egypt, South East Africa, as well as Asia, in many countries in Asia. There we're trying to, again, to repeat the same principle of early detection, rapid response to the disease outbreaks. One of the highlights of this project in Asia was a pen-side PCR for avian influenza surveillance. So we try to really see on the local level, even more than the national level, on the local level, what are the specific needs and the purpose of surveillance in each place. So it's obviously that we need to have quick results and in order to have a quick response and implement control measures. Sometimes the access to laboratory is not obvious. There are no roads, So the current surveillance or in the recent years, it's really an effort to take a sample obtained in a rural area to the laboratories. Take an average 2.5 or 3 days. So the solution that we found is really to remove the time from this equation, and without the need to send it to the lab, we can test either on the market, on the farm, near the veterinary station, and we can get the results if this is avian influenza relatively very fast, and implement the appropriate measures, control measure. When it comes to training, we have different methods of training. We try lately not to put people in the classroom, but rather train them what we call farmer and field schools, or if it's veterinary services, we try to train them on the field on biosafety, biosecurity, again, laboratory diagnosis, the data collection. It's really important in storage, because in many occasions, if there is no data collection, they don't keep the data. And importantly, to remember about risk assessment, because resources are limited, and you always want to understand where the risk is highest to dedicate these resources to maximize them as much as possible. Then we have simulation exercises. We try to do it on the field or tabletop exercises, and more and more key things that we try to train and build the capacity of local authorities, local veterinary services, and farmers to be able to control and prevent the disease effectively. In terms of a little more about disease surveillance, we, as I mentioned, because of limited resources, we try to always preach for risk-based surveillance. And so we really try from our headquarters in Rome or from the regional offices to really address each country context and try to make them what is the best for them. On the top of that, FAO is sending experts to different countries when they need, or they as part of project, and we either to the lab or as epidemiologists, even to the field, to really see the epidemiological situation in the local context and tailor really the best solution for each country, or even within the country, each region of the country. I mean, we put a lot of emphasis to communication. Once again, risk communications is extremely important, because if there is an outbreak, there is a huge impact on the poultry sector, on the economy, and we don't want the consumers to get scared and with that not to consume poultry. So the risk communication is extremely important when it comes even from the minister level. But how to guide these people, what to say and what not to say, FAO is trying to work a lot with different countries on this. We also publish, as I mentioned, we try to make access to knowledge and to technical knowledge, practical technical knowledge, very easy. So we publish either online or hard copies on different topics of FAO, focusing on different topics that related to diseases, but in this case on avian influenza, on vaccination, pro and cons of vaccination, etc. So veterinary services, particularly veterinary services, have the good access to this kind of knowledge. We also work a lot on biosecurity, on live bird markets or on the farms. So we always have some guidelines that we try to do it in a very practical way that everybody can use it, particularly veterinarians on the field or from the central veterinary services. What are the prospects for AI control now, even given the experience that we have got with the COVID pandemic? What we can learn from that more. So the fact that in many countries we have endemic situation for domestic poultry, this is not going to change, and we need to live with it, and we need to ensure that this is a kind of a status quo. And each year we see that in more and more places, particularly in poor countries with low capacity veterinary services, we see that more places are getting endemic. I mean, the disease is entered there, and it's difficult to eradicate it. It's a problem. It's a multidimensional problem. There are many reasons for that. But at the end of the day, the capacity of the veterinary services to eliminate, or first to prevent, then to eliminate the disease is a major part. So even if we try to address it in a very specific technical approach, there are so many other socioeconomic issues that leave the technical part relatively minor in terms of importance. It is obvious now, we know, particularly after the pandemic, that all the farming system and the value chain need transformation, because in one hand we have a very extensive farms, very small farms, and on the other hand we have high intensified farms, huge farms, and all of these create a conflict that in the end result of it is the outbreaks of diseases, and as we know also can reach a pandemic dimension. So in all of that, what we neglected in the past, we know that we need to consider the socioeconomic aspect of this, the fact that we have a lot of poverty, how we communicate the diseases, people behavior, how we change people behavior in terms of biosecurity, etc., the traditions of people. We could see that in other diseases as well, in Ebola, and of course today, these days with the pandemic, I think this is a live example of all of the things that we are talking a lot about. So we recognize after the pandemic that even avian influenza or other similar diseases is a global problem. It's not a problem of one country that can tackle the disease, approaching it from a regional or even global level it needs to be considered that this is a public good, the future, the poultry sector, because of the risk also that it involves in terms of human health, and we need to approach it as in a global aspects of action plan in order to tackle these threats and avoid them from being, as we see these days, avoiding being a pandemic. Some aspects of a risk factor of avian influenza introduction into a country and spread, even as I said before, even if wild birds are playing a role, the main factors for the spread are humans between the farms. So basically, because of legal or illegal trade movements, the service of people in the farms, people are coming to sell things in the farms, veterinarians coming, food stuff, etc. These are the main factors to spread the disease among farms, and of course limited biosecurity, not saying absence of biosecurity in different parts of the value chain, particularly in farms, of course increase this risk of disease spread between the farms. So one of the most important messages for the world, but particularly in Europe, is that a highly pathogenic avian influenza spread mainly through the actions of people. And biosecurity is not a luxury; it's a priority. It's a must. And beyond that, good farm management practices are essential. Without that, we just allow the virus to spread all over and impact the poultry sector. Then let's talk about finally what are we doing with countries to alert them on time about the risk of avian influenza outbreaks. So here is an example. In 2016 or 15, the winter of 2015-16, in Southeast Asia, there were in the flyways. There were. We think that the source was there with migrating birds. The virus has spread, H5N8 spread toward the west and as well toward the east. And then in the spring of 2016, in different breeding grounds, when there are mixed population of different bird species, the virus actually flourished, the H5N8 flourished and affected even different species. Some were more susceptible, some were less, some were more impacted by the virus, some species were less. But then, in the winter of 2016, we see the virus with different species, migrating birds, reaching Western Europe in the winter of 2016. So it's all all of this, we knew about the risk of that already in August 2016, and we knowing the migration path of birds from east to west, we knew that it's going to come. And then in 2000, we already sent an alert in different parts. Here is the latest one that we sent in 2020, but long before that, actually in 2016, we already sent an alert to countries that should be careful about this, strengthen biosecurity, be prepared, etc. And since then, since 2016, we are basically doing it every year. And the latest one was in 2020, and if I'm not wrong, also in 2021. But the interesting is one that, as you can see here, we sent a global alert, what we call Empress Watch from FAO to countries in September 2016, warning countries about the threat of the virus, because it was in the summer of 2016, the virus was, as I mentioned, breeding grounds. The virus was discovered or detected by the Russians on the border with Mongolia in a lake, very small part of the lake that is in Russia. It's mainly in Mongolia. And they reported on that. And because it's a breeding ground, because we knew that these birds are going to migrate to Western Europe, we alert all countries. In terms of H7N9, that in China, as I mentioned, we try to teach countries to work to strengthen the capacity to do risk assessment, to understand again, as I mentioned before, where are the highest likelihood of the disease to occur, and based on that, adopt control measures. And once again, the risk assessment capacity is extremely important, not only in developing countries, but in all of the countries, because then you can design what we call risk-based surveillance and risk-based response, because every country is facing limited resources, and to maximize these resources for a successful control, you must have a risk assessment first. That's it for today. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, you can contact me and communicate with me. Thank you very much.
Okay, Aaron, thank you very much for this information about current situation and how the situation was developing with avian influenza. Hope everybody has right now more clear idea how this disease appeared and how it was developing, and probably the next topic which we are going to disclose, also connected with avian influenza, but more closer to biosecurity, how to protect your poultry farms from this kind of disease. And for this topic, we invited Ms. Rebecca Tierney, who is poultry advisor from Teagasc, Ballyhaise, from Ireland, and Rebecca is going to present details how to protect your farms against this kind of disease. Rebecca, you're welcome.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Tierney. I'm a poultry advisor with Teagasc. So Teagasc are a education advisory and research body based in Ireland. I'm here to present to you on avian influenza, HPAI and LPAI, and some tips on biosecurity. So what is avian influenza? It's also known as bird flu. So it's a viral disease that affects poultry and wildfowl primarily. Domestic chickens, so our laying hens and broilers and turkeys, are very susceptible to this disease and can be fatal in most infected birds. However, the likes of ducks may have greater resistance to the disease. And because of that, these aquatic birds can act as a reservoir for the disease and can then transmit this to other susceptible birds. So it's caused by a type A influenza virus. And there are two types of the virus, LPAI and HPAI. And depending on the pathogenicity of it, the severity of the disease differs. So as I said, it's HPAI, which would be the highly pathogenic one. This spreads rapidly and can cause serious disease with high mortality of up to levels of 100% within 48 hours of contracting the disease. Low pathogenic AI causes a mild disease and in some cases may even go undetected. Here in Ireland, both HPAI and LPAI are notifiable under SI 130/2016. This means that it must be reported to the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine if the disease is suspected. There's a number of ways that avian influenza can be spread. However, with good management and biosecurity, we can aim to reduce the risk of this spread. If we look at this slide, in the two orange boxes, these are maybe the lower risk of spread. So live poultry and hatching eggs do pose a risk if they are sourced from an affected flock or an infected flock with AI. However, in most poultry and eggs, we're sourcing them from the EU. And if an outbreak were to occur in a member state, the tracing will take place. And there's regulatory controls already in place, such as traces here in Ireland, to prevent this. In the second box, we see farm inputs, such as feed or bedding. Any farm input into a farm can pose a risk if it carries the disease. However, again, we have tight regulatory controls in place. All feed, bedding, or any farm input must be sourced from a reliable source. Any essential vehicles or personnel coming onto the farm must be disinfected with wheel sprays coming into the site. PPE is essential and we must follow all biosecurity measures that are put in place by the farmer on that site. However, the largest risk in the red box here on the right is migratory wild birds, as it's almost impossible to control their flight paths. These wild birds can interact with resident wild birds here in Ireland or across Europe. But they can also interact with commercial or backyard flocks that are out on the range. So if we look at this map from the Department of Food, Agriculture and the Marine, there's thousands of migratory birds with many flyways across Europe and across the world. So a flyway is the flight path used by large numbers of birds while migrating between their breeding grounds and then over to their overwintering quarters. So we can see they pass through Europe there on their flyway. The wintering sites for migratory wild birds is often here in Western Europe and West Africa. And as some of these birds travel over 10,000 kilometres to reach their wintering ground, they do have stopovers. And in these stopovers, different subtypes can develop from mixing with other birds. Colder weather in Central Europe can often push the birds further west in Europe. And this was the case in 2020, when a cold snap across Central Europe pushed all the birds towards the UK and Ireland. And we saw here in Ireland, one site with almost 500,000 birds being culled out as a result of LPAI. In terms of the signs that we're looking out for, high pathogenic AI, the symptoms are quite obvious. You'll have a loss of appetite and excessive thirst, so reduced feed intake and increased water intake. Egg laying will cease. You'll have coughing, sneezing, respiratory signs. Their feathers will look ruffled and dishevelled. They'll have drooping wings, dragging their legs, twisting the neck, twisting the head, and in some cases, complete paralysis. The swelling and blue discoloration, which I'll show on the next slide, can be seen on their combs and wattles around the head area. There'll be diarrhea, so very wet manure, sudden death, and as I said earlier, mortality rates of up to 100%. While in low pathogenic avian influenza, the signs are much less: mild respiratory disease, depression, and drop in egg production. They can go unnoticed, and in some cases, birds can recover. However, here in Ireland, the decision was taken to cull out to prevent the spread of this disease in case it was to worsen. So if you look at these images, you can see there the combs and wattles discoloured to that bluish colour. We see the ruffled feathers here in C, so they just look a bit dishevelled. D, the twisting of the head and neck back on itself. And in E and F, we can see the discoloration of the shanks or the legs and feet. It's all about how we stop this. Biosecurity is one method. So biosecurity is defined as procedures or measures designed to protect the population against harmful biological or biochemical substances. And in this case, we're talking about a poultry population. So in terms of poultry farms, what does biosecurity mean? So it includes all measures taken to reduce the risk of introducing a disease to the farm and then also spreading that disease within the farm. So we don't want to bring it to our site, but if it does happen, we want to stop it from spreading from house to house. So that means carrying out actions from keeping the poultry, the staff, and the farm as a whole itself healthy. So there's two sets of biosecurity: external biosecurities, and this is the measures we put in place to reduce the risk of the disease coming onto the farm in the first place. So keeping the outside world diseases outside the farm. The internal biosecurity, they're the measures that we put in place to prevent the spread of the disease within the farm. So should that disease cross our farm gate, how do we stop it spreading from house 1, 2, 3, depending on the number of houses? So I have a quick video here that I'm going to play for you now on biosecurity. So that was just a short video produced by Teagasc on the correct procedure for entering and exiting a farm in relation to PPE. When deciding on where to place a site, we need to consider biosecurity from the very start. So that biosecurity stage starts when you pick your site. You need to consider where your farm is going to be, the location of that farm to other poultry units, the proximity to water bodies in the case of wild birds coming in, or ducks, wild geese, etc., that may act as a reservoir for AI, as I stated earlier. But you also need to consider the ease of access for lorries or large vehicles coming to your site. The next step is structural biosecurity, and this refers to the physical layout of the site, the materials you use to build your unit, and the equipment used on the farm. So the site layout is important. Will you be placing the meal bins in such a way that you can prevent lorries from coming on site? You need to ensure that the meal bins are placed correctly. You need to ensure that there's a large turning area for lorries coming in for bird collection or bird drop-off. You want to make sure that it's ease of cleaning. The building materials must be hard wearing, very easy to wash down and to disinfect to withstand that. If we compare old wooden frame structure houses to the new clear span housing, the clear span should wash easier and withstand more power hosing in comparison to that of the wooden material, where cracks and crevices can develop, and it can be difficult to remove the dirt and bacteria from within that. The perimeter fencing is crucial. We want to stop any unnecessary visitors or wildlife coming in. A gate that is lockable must be in place at the entrance, and that gate should be locked at all times, and access should only be granted when the poultry farmer is present or an essential visitor really needs to come. It's very important to have good cleaning and hygiene plans in place. That is the day-to-day cleaning, the terminal hygiene, and just general cleanliness around the site. So the next step of this is the operational biosecurity, and this is the day-to-day measures that we implement on our farms to prevent disease coming in the first place and to prevent it spread any further. So when we put all three of these together, we should have a very clear, coherent plan for our biosecurity on site. So in terms of the day-to-day biosecurity, what do we look at? No access should be gained to the site unless with the permission of the farmer. There should be a locked gate that can only be opened by the farmer. The essential visitors must use PPE if they have to come on site. And when you're planning your site, it will be important to consider off-site parking, so a parking area at the gate. This prevents any vehicles that don't really need to come on site coming in and potentially carrying something in. Where they do need to come on site, such as service vehicles, feed deliveries, chick deliveries, egg collection, there should be a wheel spray in place, and this should be used by the lorry driver. So it's very important to follow all protocols that are put in place. For anyone that does come on site, they must complete a visitor log. This visitor log contains details such as the date of visit, their name, the company they're visiting from, the reason for their visit, where they were last, and when that was. So what poultry farm did they visit last, and where was that in relation to you? As we've seen in the video, there was a step-over barrier in place. This step-over barrier is a very simple measure, but it does create a distinct difference between a clean and dirty zone. So the dirty zone is this area where we come from the outside into our lobby area. Once we cross that step-over barrier, we are into our clean zone, the area the birds are housed within. The physical barrier indicates that this is the point where another set of disposable over boots, or if it's the case of the farmer or staff working on the farm, this house-specific clothing should be put on. You can see in this photo, the step-over barrier goes the whole way to the ground, and that prevents any dirt or material potentially being kicked into the clean area, which may be gathered onto the boots. It doesn't have to be expensive. A simple board with a sheet of ply down to the ground can create that step-over barrier. Another good idea is to have it at sitting height so that you can physically sit down and pull on your boots as you cross over. The exterior zone at the front of the house is crucial, as all traffic, whether it be vehicles or personnel coming to the site, cross to the entry of the house. So we can see in this photo, it has been washed down, it's very clean, there's no debris, no bacteria or no dirt to be seen. And that should be kept clean and disinfected throughout the site and throughout the growing period. If all traffic enters across this and we then walk across it, we may potentially carry something into the house. And if our PPE or our biosecurity measures are lacking, we could be carrying something into the house. Biosecurity and hygiene supplies must be provided by the farm. PPE should always be available for visitors coming to the site in case they don't have their own. Provide any staff with house-specific clothing. Specific biosecurity boots are available with no grooves on the undersole. This prevents any dirt or material being held within the grooves and are easily disinfected then. Soap, hot water, paper towels must always be available for visitors or staff coming to the site. There should also be hand sanitizer, something we're all too familiar with at this point in time, but it should be on site for staff or visitors to use and prevent the spread of disease. We mentioned farm inputs that they can cause a risk. These farm inputs include the feed, the water that is being piped into our birds, the bedding material we're using. Any inputs must be sourced from a reliable, biosecure source. You want to be sure that what you bring into your farm isn't causing an issue. Records and samples of feed should be maintained. Here in Ireland, we must maintain feed samples for 3 months. That is if there is ever a case of disease or an issue with feed, we can trace it back, we can test, and we can see if that was the issue. Water testing is carried out on an annual basis. You're testing for the likes of Salmonella, E. coli, Staphylococci. It's a good way of knowing that the water coming into your house is clean and potable. When you consider bedding, it must be free from contaminants. The likes of straw or things like that may contain mycotoxins. So you want to make sure that it hasn't been stored in such a way that it could potentially be infected by avian influenza with wild birds flying over. Rodent control is crucial on farms. It's inevitable that with feed, heat, water, bedding, it's an ideal home for these vermin. So they can be transmitters of many diseases, and therefore we have to be very careful to manage them correctly. A rodent control plan should be put in place and implemented. On a weekly basis, the bait points should be checked. If there's any activity, a rodent control company should be coming. They will visit on a 6 to 8 weeks cycle anyway to check that everything is in place. But where additional activity is picked up, be sure to call your rodent control company. It's very important that any dead birds are collected twice daily from the house and stored in the sealed container. The idea of the sealed container is to stop the likes of vermin, other wild birds or wild animals getting there and potentially spreading what has caused the death of that bird. Some farms have begun storing birds in a deep freeze. This prevents the spread of disease and also prevents attracting those vermin or rodents. And a suitable company should be employed to collect those dead birds at least once a week. The equipment used on farms, whether it be internal equipment such as the feeders and drinkers, must be emptied, washed and disinfected thoroughly between each flock. We want to prevent any carryover between flock to flock. Any maintenance equipment, such as is seen in here in the picture, shovels, brushes, even screwdrivers, things like that, should be house specific. As you can see here in this picture, they're actually colour coded, and you can know very clearly if the wrong equipment is in the wrong house. It doesn't have to be that fancy, some tape or paper to indicate which house the equipment belongs to. Now, if this isn't taking place on farm where the expensive equipment is in use, be sure to thoroughly disinfect the equipment between houses. When we look at staff, anyone working on the farm should not be in contact with any other poultry. Shared labour can be an issue with the spread of disease. Training for staff should be provided on animal welfare, health of the birds, biosecurity and hygiene practices for the farm. And a record should be maintained on this training to ensure that things are kept up to date. And finally, at the end of the flock, thorough terminal hygiene policy should be in place to make sure that any harmful bacteria doesn't carry over for the next subsequent flock of birds. Terminal hygiene is practiced after the removal of the flock. So we carry out a dry clean out. That's the removal of any manure, dust or debris. We then wash it down from top to bottom. We disinfect it, dry it and disinfect it for any pests or bugs. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it informative and some benefit. I want to thank Maxim for inviting me to speak.
Rebecca, thank you very much for information concerning biosecurity on poultry farms and how to fight with avian influenza, even not fight but protect and not to have this kind of disease on poultry farms. And now we are moving to the next our speaker. It is a representative from Greengage company, Ms. Jadwiga Sulek, who is going to present us information about how we can improve animal welfare and how to make animal breeding easier, wiser and more ecological with the involvement of induction lighting technology and sensors. Jadwiga, you're welcome.
Greetings everyone! My name is Jadwiga Sulek and I'm the Test and Trial Engineer at Greengage Agrotech Limited. Welcome to our presentation about making poultry farming easier, smarter and greener using innovative, inductive, lighting technology and sensors. Greengage Agrotech is based at the Rossi Innovation Centre, University of Edinburgh, which has the largest concentration of animal science and animal welfare related expertise in Europe. And our business model is about using a data, sensors and lighting platform for precision livestock farming to improve animal welfare, productivity and compliance within the sheds. What problem are we trying to solve? We are looking to accommodate natural daylight within the poultry house with the aim to improve flock performance, behavior and animal welfare. At the same time, we are looking to facilitate moving data captured via pencil and paper of subjective key performance indicators to providing real-time outcome-based measures of animal welfare on a 24/7 basis. Lastly, moving from a historical post-crop data review to having an intelligent and machine learning platform with an AV-happy score that proactively allows for decision-making at both farmer and management levels. And how we are going to do this? By understanding how poultry see and by then using the science of light to match their natural world. Chickens see very differently from humans because they can move each eye independently and have a panoramic field of vision of 300 degrees without turning their heads. Coupled with their binocular vision, they can focus on more than one object at a time, which is one of the reasons why it makes them difficult to catch. They see light four-dimensionally, meaning that they match both the sensory effect of a spectra of light within their visible spectrum of four primary colors. Chickens see light fluctuations that humans can't and are extremely sensitive to flicker. Why is poultry 3 times more sensitive to light is due to: firstly, short wavelengths penetrate the eye and stimulate the retina, signals brain to control behavior and development, for example, animal recognition and feather coloring. Secondly, long wavelengths penetrate the skull to stimulate the pituitary gland, which produces hormones necessary for growth, reproduction, and egg laying. And the long wavelengths also stimulate the pineal gland, which modulates behavior and sleep patterns in both circadian and seasonal cycles. Thirdly, poultry can see a wider range of the visible light spectrum than humans. This capability makes it possible for birds to perceive ultraviolet A light. This is key for birds in recognizing the environment, foraging for food, and mating behaviors. By adapting lighting conditions to the matched chicken's visible spectrum improves behavior, welfare, and productivity. Color and the quality of color is an important aspect of poultry lighting. Poultry need a wide light source that emits the right wave spectrum of color and should be between 2700 and 3200 Kelvin. Kelvin is a measurement used to describe the color temperature of a light source. Red light is beneficial for sexual maturation, and blue light has a calming effect and reduces stress and fear in broilers, for example in catching. A color reindeer index (CRE) is a quantity measure of the ability of a light source to reveal the colors of various objectives faithfully in comparison with an ideal or natural light source, and therefore light sources with a high CRI are desirable in color-critical environments, for example feeders and drinkers. Chickens prefer brightly illuminated areas, and they will see a light intensity far higher than humans do. Chickens evolved from dinosaurs which had no real need for nocturnal vision, so they don't see well in the dark. However, lighting must be at right chicken lux level. Poultry farmers should care the most about the correct lux level to achieve stimulation of natural behavior, for example perching, optimum productivity yields, for example final weight, good welfare, for example reduced mortality. A top tip is that most lux meters are set for human vision, and therefore look for ones that are great for lead or chicken lux levels. Alternatively, focus on balancing the light intensity in the shed. Chicken's natural physiology requires a period of darkness every day, and any light source must match the bird's circadian rhythm. This means that the lighting source for the birds should be fully dimmable, and independent control of lighting should be used within the shed, allowing for much more management over the planned daily lighting schedule. Chickens see light fluctuations that humans can't and are extremely sensitive to flicker. Chickens can process visual images 6 times more per second than humans, at 150 to 100 frames per second. Flickering lights will cause negative behavior such as stress and reduced productivity or laying rate. However, constant current reduces flicker. Frequency of light source should be above 150 Hz to avoid flickering. Induction power provides constant current at 50 kHz with low to zero photometric flicker, eliminating stress-induced strobe effects. The primary consideration for any shed lighting design is to get a uniform distribution of light throughout the shed, eliminating shadows and dark areas, eliminating any bright intense light spot in areas, and keeping variation in lux level across the floor to a minimum. What sets our technology apart in this space? Greengage has a patented inductance power system supplying inductance power comms which enable smart lights and sensors to simply clip on to a single cable, reducing installation, maintenance and operating costs, safe from fire and electrocution. Patented LED lamps with tuned spectrum for poultry and swine, stimulating down to dusk conditions inside the shed. No electronic driver in lamps and genuine 100,000 hours lamp life. Remote access controlled fully dimmable lamps. We have developed the RAIZMAN sensor platform with an integrated set of induction power IoT sensors that delivers real-time trend analysis to alert users to any deviation from set thresholder for environmental parameters, temperature, lux level, and dark out periods. Monitors air quality and gas levels, CO2, ammonia, and relative humidity to ensure environmental and welfare legislations are adhered to. Animal welfare sensors, monitoring acoustics for bird vocalization and infrared camera for thermal imaging. Linked to a cloud-based database and BI platform where our app visualization the data with customizable alerts shed to percentage daily target curve, helping farmers manage animal health and welfare 24/7. Our real-time animal welfare index enable users to benchmark and track performance on a by-flock basis, visualizing outcomes based on behavioral measurements to predict early stage disease, measure improved welfare and increase yield, and to give a quantitative crop or shed happy score. We undertook research work which identified distinct categories and types of vocal sounds. 24 different sounds were identified and up to 30 different sounds if rooster calls included. By understanding the meaning of chicken calls allows us to monitor their focus, feeding, fighting, resting, and emotional state, contented, stressed, depressed. We record the vocalization of broilers and by doing real-time analysis via an algorithm of the acoustics in the flock, we can detect changes in volume and pitch, linked to flock level stress, activity, and health. The research showed that more distress calls, lower acoustic entropy measures in the early days of the flock correlated with higher mortality and lower growth. The farmer will be able to track the bird's behavioral trends and their emotional states, which can indicate cold stress, hot stress, and enteritis infection. Data analysis determines which stock person intervention were the most effective, for example, changing the temperature. Infrared camera for thermal movement monitors flock mobility for natural exploratory behavior. Healthy birds are expected to have high levels of movement, data from IR camera sensors. Camera algorithm measures movement score. Thermal imaging gives the farmer visibility of flock's mobility and cluster that can trigger poor litter quality, pododermatitis, and adverse gut health. Thermal image monitors body and skin temperature, symptomatic of stress and infection. Stress causes increase in comp temperature. Imagine a world in the near future where a farmer can use tunable light intelligently to improve animal productivity and welfare with a built-in early warning animal health and disease detection capability. Imagine you could listen for stress calls in your flock 24/7. Imagine you could smell for ammonia or CO2 in your barn 24/7. Imagine you could watch your flock movement and welfare 24/7, done in a biosecure way with no requirement to enter the barns, which delivers health and welfare data every 15 minutes, 24/7 to your tablet or mobile device. Means you act faster with interventions to make a real difference to your birds' health and welfare. Good for your birds, good for your bottom line, good for you. This is our vision for improving the future of livestock farming. Thank you very much for the attention, and if you are in the Congress, we would like to invite you to come to see our stand and have a conversation with you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Jadwiga, thank you very much for presenting this topic. It was quite interesting and very informative, and this is something which we have to think about and start planning how to change technologies on poultry farms connected with the lighting. And right now, so just it was the last speaker in section number 2. Probably we are finishing section number 2, and we will see each other in half an hour. So just the next section, section number 3, we are starting at 15:30. Also would like to remind that in case if you have any questions and if you're participating online, you can put those questions on chat, and our moderators will gather all those questions and distribute to our speakers. Participants who are here in Congress Center, you're welcome to provide your questions to our assistants, and we will record all the answers to those questions and publish them on our communication channels, social media channels, our Congress website, and also on our educational online platform, agrimasterclass.com. Be sure that every question will receive the answer from our speaker as a recorded video. Sorry for not having Q&A sessions, but we have a lot of speakers, a lot of information which we would like to present today during the Global Poultry Web Congress. Just you see, half an hour, not half an hour, 1 year and a half, we didn't have opportunity to meet each other face to face. So just a lot of questions just become very, very hot and requiring more time to be presented. I remind you that we will see each other in half an hour. At 15:30 we are starting our section number 3.